Hear me okay?
Yeah, man. Can you hear me? You got me?
Yeah, I got you. You're good.
Oh, yeah, brother.
How you doing, man? You doing all right?
Oh, I'm good, man. How you doing?
Man, I'm making it. I appreciate you being on here for me, dude.
Yeah, no problem, dude. Anytime, man. Sorry that,
So,
I'm hanging out at the dungeon, man, my favorite bar. Hanging
no,
out
you're
with the
good, man. Uh, yeah. So, I wanted to get you on because I am big into the paranormal realm here, and I kind of consider the Bigfoot a little bit of the paranormal realm. Depends on who you talk to. So, and I'm
Right,
very interested in the Bigfoot theories because I myself don't believe in it, but I like to get people on that do, and they try to make me believe a little bit. Does
right,
that make sense?
right. I got you.
So, I got Keith Dickens on, and he is a Bigfoot hunter. Is that right? Is that what you do? Just
Yes.
making sure I get you.
Yep.
Okay.
I am the founder of the Bigfoot Hunter Society.
Bigfoot Hunter Society. So real quick here, and we'll get into the whole Bigfoot thing here in just a few. But take me back to, did you have a sighting of Bigfoot to start this society, or did you just believe in Bigfoot that much you just want to start something?
Okay, so very first, I grew up small town Ohio. Never had any
Right.
idea what Bigfoot was. So I
Okay.
was about 12, 13 years old. I lived in my grandparents' house. They had 4 acres of cornfields, soybean fields, and woods. And I was out there one day, shooting my BB gun with my little brother. And we're out there. Long story short, we're out there shooting, laughing. Look out to the clearing, probably about 50 yards from me. You just see this big dark figure, kind of going through the wood line. And so I stop and I go, "Hey, this is private property. Who are you, man? You out here hunting?" Just a slow turn, and you just see just slow walking towards me. Man, if it was a man, that man was 7'5",
Right.
and it was like. So I grabbed my little brother. We ran upstairs, ran inside, called my grandpa who was at work. I said, "Grandpa, there's a big old hairy man outside. What's going on?" And he said, "Are you sure it ain't Uncle Randy?" I said, "No, it ain't Uncle Randy. He could eat Uncle Randy." So that was my first sighting back when I was like 12, 13.
Now, you don't happen to think it was a bear, do you? Because
So,
I've seen bears walk on just their front legs, just for a few
right.
minutes at a time. So, do you think that's possible? And I'm going to be
So,
hitting you from all different. It's not like I'm not saying I don't believe you. It's just I'm trying. You know what I mean? I'm trying to impact from both ways.
right. So where I'm from in northern Ohio, so we've
Okay.
seen there's black bear in southern Ohio that are native, right? But where I'm at,
Hmm.
tippy top northern Ohio, there hasn't been a bear sighting since 1862.
Okay. Okay. So,
So
what made you move from Ohio to Alaska? Because you said that you're in Alaska now. Are you working there? Or you decided to move?
yes, I am. I'm living in Fairbanks right now. So my job brought me up here. I'm in the Army,
Okay.
so I got
Oh,
stationed up
okay.
back in 2018, and not only beautiful country up here, all sorts of untapped wilderness. I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
I'm kind of splotchy up here, check it out.
Well, man, appreciate your service. Thanks for what you're doing, man. I really do appreciate it because you have the balls. I don't to do it, so I really do appreciate it, man. Man.
It's all good, brother. Somebody's got to. It's just a job, man.
So, was that the only Bigfoot sighting that you've ever had, or have you had more?
That was my first. I've had two.
Oh, okay. Well, go ahead and tell me the other one, man. I'm very interested.
All right, so my second one was probably about 6, 7 months after that. I was on
Okay.
my bus getting drove back from high school. It was me, my buddy, and the bus driver. We were about 2
Mm-hmm.
miles away from my grandparents' property, and it was basically a big cornfield. And we're all, just smoking cigarettes, joking on the bus. Bus driver looks over. She goes, "What is that?" I turn around. My buddy turns around. I told y'all. I told y'all. And you look over probably about 200 yards away. There was a big cornfield that was kind of cut down and wood line. And there he was, just walking the wood line. And from that day on, I'll say, I don't know what I saw the first couple times, but I know I saw something. And that's what kind of got me into this.
So was it the same creature you saw 6 months before that you saw 6 months after?
Oh, if it wasn't, it had to have been something very similar. Big
Okay.
old, big tall man, what you'd think would be like a dude in a ghillie suit, with a military background.
Right.
You're like, oh, that's got to be a guy in a ghillie suit. But about
Mm.
twice as big as the biggest guy you've seen in Special Forces in a ghillie suit. Just red, shaggy hair, walking on down.
So that must have had a very big impact on you when you were 12 or 13, because years later you started this Bigfoot Hunter Society. So how did you start this group, this society, and how did you go to where it's at now?
So when I first started, like I said, ever since I saw him the first few times, I caught the Bigfoot fever. And
Okay.
back in that day, early 2008, 2009, you didn't have your Finding Bigfoot on Discovery Channel or Animal Planet. You didn't have it. It was as mainstream, right, as it is now. So me and a bunch of my buddies, we'd all get together and we'd, go stake out the woods in my backyard, to go stake out the woods in their backyard. And we'd be out there like, let's just see what we can find, man. Let's get out here and we'll just be real
Hmm.
quiet. We got our shotguns and hopefully something will show up.
Did anything ever show up?
So unfortunately, right, which is the biggest thing that people, hate on believers like me. They're like, oh, well, so much for that evidence because he never showed up again.
Right.
But we found a few prints that we took plaster casts of.
Okay.
And I'm sure if you ever talked to any guys that I was looking up your stuff earlier. I think you've talked to a couple other Bigfooters before.
Yeah, I've talked to Dave Spinks. He's all over the Travel Channel and stuff like that. So yeah, early on, but yeah.
Okay, so we found, what they would call like a Bigfoot nest. Bunch of like trees bent out different ways, big grass set up. It almost looks like the way a lowland gorilla would set up its nest, because they're documented. You have footage of it. And you compare that to what we were seeing, and it was very similar.
Would you be opposed to like the people that saw it back in the 30s or whatever they said they saw a Bigfoot sighting? That do you think they saw like the Gigantopithecus? And if you don't know what that is, the Gigantopithecus was like a giant ape from, they stood like 7 to 8 feet tall, and it was a rare species of gorilla, and they died out I think the 50s, 60s, somewhere around there. So that's my suspicion. There is, I can see both sides of, I can see how it's fake, but also if the Gigantopithecus was killed off or whatever in the 50s and 60s, what are they seeing now? And that's kind of where I get with the black bear or the regular grizzly bear just sitting on its hind legs for certain minutes. But I saw the Patterson-Gimlin film.
Yes.
When was the first time you saw that, and what was your reaction to it when you first saw it? Because did you see it before you had your encounter, or did you see it after?
I saw it after, as a matter of fact, because at first, being a 12-year-old kid from small country town, Ohio.
All right, you're going to research it.
In the back of your mind, you're like, I think I know what Bigfoot is.
Yeah.
But when you see something, you're like, I have no idea what I just saw. But yeah, you punch it in the old Google search, and of course, you search Google. What's the first thing that comes up? Patterson-Gimlin film. Always.
Mm-hmm.
always. And people say, very divisive film, as you know, right? You've got half the people that are like, oh, that's your definitive proof right there. And then you got people, oh, that looks like Planet of the Apes, that's a man in a suit.
Mm-hmm.
So I saw it about probably 4 months after my first encounter. And I was like, I'm going to look a little more into it. And I did the research, and I still keep up to this very day on developments. They've been analyzing this film since the 60s. And
Yeah.
there's still no definitive either way, right? But when they've enhanced it, it actually shows muscle movement under the fur. So the way it walks, you can see the flex of the leg muscles and the shoulder muscles. And they have proven that during that year, that time frame in the 60s, the best costumes they had were in the Planet of the Apes movies. And they were still about 30, 40 years away from being able to recreate muscle movements under skin in their costumes. So if you're going to just discount that film and tell me it's fake, how could someone have access to technology into a suit that was better than the best of Hollywood could do in that time? You know what I mean?
Yeah, like you said, I've heard different, historians or whatever you want to say that have discussed the film, and they do say that show me where there's a gorilla suit or whatever you want to call it that was made in the 60s that could do this. But didn't they declare that that was a female Bigfoot or Yeti, whatever you want to call it?
By judging the film and doing the research, there were augmented
Breasts,
what
I
looked
think,
like
right?
breasts. So yes,
Right.
the assumption is that was a female Sasquatch. Yes, you are correct.
Now, my first thing that kind of confused me is because have you watched the full thing or have you seen just like the full 58 seconds or something like that? Because
No,
there's
no,
for like 6 minutes. Go ahead.
I've watched the film deconstructed, taken apart, put back together about 100 different times.
Yeah, so for the first like 5.5 minutes, it's just plain woods and blurriness, and then all of a sudden, it's just out of. But to me, that's how a Sasquatch or a gorilla would just emerge like that. It's just coming out of the wild, not knowing something's there, kind of like a deer or something. But my first confusion with it was, okay, it looked at him and knew it was doing something, was in its land. Why didn't it attack? Was it because it didn't feel threatened? Or, you know what I mean? It's just that confusion of why did it attack versus why it didn't, you know?
Right now, if you know basic primate biology, I'm sure you've heard of Dr. Jane Goodall.
Yes.
Yes, she is one of the forerunners, of great ape research. She's been doing it since the 60s. The lady's a legend. She's one of my heroes. But she has come out and personally said it makes more sense for Bigfoot to exist than to not exist. And she said, judging by its characteristics and the way it reacts, for what film we do have, it acts like a bonomo, which is, if you know anything about bonomos, I'm not sure. They're
Don't.
Okay. So a bonomo is a great ape species that was honestly just recently discovered probably about 20 years ago, maybe less. They are cousins of the chimpanzee.
Okay.
So chimpanzees are very violent, aggressive creatures, right?
Right.
As primates go. You hear the 911 calls, you hear this chimp's ripping my face off. You see them at the zoo there. The bonomo is basically what she calls them, the hippie cousin. They groom each other. They live in small groups. They're nonviolent. They would rather avoid conflict and hide than fight. So that's kind of what the Sasquatch, from what at least I've experienced, seems to model itself after. It seems to just be an elusive, kind of shy, more, hey, I didn't mean to roll up on this. I don't know who these people are or what this species. I don't know what's watching me right now, but I'd rather leave than try to fight.
Right. Because that thing could tear a human limb to limb. there's no there's no
Oh,
mistake
I'm
in that.
sure if one of those things wanted to, 7'2", 7'3" is much muscle you can see under those films. And from what I saw, that thing could pick somebody. That thing could take either me or you and just tear us apart in 2 seconds if it wanted to.
So how much of the history of the Bigfoot are you familiar with? Like, do you know how the name Bigfoot and Sasquatch differ? Like, is there a differential? Like, how do they say Bigfoot and or because obviously it came from the big footprint of the research I've done. So is the scientific name a Sasquatch or how is that?
Now, how it started, the name Bigfoot was first coined and became famous in the late 50s, Northern California. Up there, Jerry Crew was the man's name. He found the large
Okay.
footprints around his construction site and took the first plaster casts in that decade. And he became a
Okay.
huge tabloid sensation. And that's how the name Bigfoot was coined. Sasquatch comes from the northern, like the Canadian Native American term. That has been documented and seen since the early 1600s.
Right.
So,
Here, and I can debate this myself, but I just want someone here that can actually, debate it with me. Is I would ask myself all the time, if this thing is real, where are the remains of the dead ones? Because obviously there's some, but then I also look at it as, well, if I'm in, the woods or if I'm just in some back town, I don't see, remains of a deer or bear or anything like that. So you can kind of debunk that quickly. But how many of these Sasquatches do you think are out there? Do you think there's just like an endless species of them, or do you think there's just very few around
okay,
with the
so
knowledge that you have?
right, so you make a valid point, right? Because if you go into the fossil record,
Right.
obviously you go way, 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 way back, right? The Jurassic, Cretaceous. You're finding dinosaurs. You're like, well,
Yeah.
we can discover an animal that lived 65 million years ago. Why can't you find me proof of something that you claim still lives today?
Sure. Sure.
Right. But so if you go into the native deciduous forests of North America, the temperate forests of North
Mm.
America, they are the way the climate works, they are not designed for those remains to stay. You've got scavengers. Not only that, all the fungus species we have now that couldn't thrive back a couple million years ago that are there now, right? The mushrooms that grow up, break down the body. And now, if you think these creatures have just a little bit of intelligence, and they're trying to hide themselves, and they're afraid of modern man, and they're trying to avoid other predators, right? And if they have a little bit of intelligence like what we do, maybe they bury their dead or have some kind of burial rites, you're not going to find those bodies. So I feel like it's pretty
That's
easy to.
that's that's what I find freaky about it. Like, what if they're just as smart as we are and they can burn their loved ones or bury their loved ones? Because then we're just thinking about another species here. We're just like, okay, these are very 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 human like, because it's just one of those weird things. But I want to get your thoughts on this. Like I said, I had Dave Spinks on, and he kind of drove me off of, okay, you're kind of going a little nuts on me. We were discussing the history and the discrimination and stuff like that of Bigfoot, and he seemed to be on the path that Bigfoot was some type of alien kin. Are you opposed to that, or have you heard that? What are your thoughts on that? Because that's kind of when I was, and no disrespect if you do think that, but I was kind of like, oh, okay, you're kind of turning this into a real ghost story. You know what I mean?
Right,
Like they just
right.
up and disappear. That's kind of a little too much for me to believe, in my honest opinion.
So basically, when you get to Bigfooters, you basically you've got two main kind of criteria that cut us in half, right? So I'm sure you've seen Finding Bigfoot on Animal Planet.
Right.
I'm sure you've heard of the BFRO, right? Matt Moneymaker, those kind of guys.
Yes.
Bo, those dudes. Who
Yes.
believe that Bigfoot is just a sentient great ape that's undiscovered, just your regular cut and dry animal. There's no supernatural to it, right?
Sure.
And then you've got the other half of the community, which you were pointing out, that think either they're aliens that were dropped off from another alien species, hybrid aliens, or this trans-dimensional being that can jump portals and all this craziness. So yes, there's definitely two. That's a huge cut and dry. The biggest thing that cuts us as Bigfooters apart, right? So you have the guys that think it's just a lost species of ape, and then you got the guys that think, oh, it's a supernatural alien that can jump dimensions and kidnap your babies. So to the people that believe that kind of stuff, I'm not going to openly discredit them, because I mean, if you can give me evidence or show me that maybe that's true, more power to you. But I lean more to the BFRO, Matt Moneymaker kind of, hey, this is just a species, a regular biological species that was born, evolved on this planet. They're small numbers, and they're just here, man. There's no supernatural voodoo to them. They're just a small species of lost large primate that has somehow been able to, outsmart us and hide away from us.
And you mentioned like Bigfoot Hunter, because they've been on for like 12 years. They've yet to capture anything. And here's my thing to that. I think if that Bigfoot or Sasquatch is in fact intelligent, they're not going to show up. They're not going to. Because it could be, let's say if an alien spaceship, a UFO was to land in your backyard. You take a picture of that right now. You're going to take it to Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, whatever. 99.9% of those people are going to say, oh, that's photoshopped.
Right.
It's like all the ghost shows on TV. Oh, that's somebody in the background busting a glass bottle. So in my honest opinion, I think if a Sasquatch is very intelligent, they're not going to show themselves on camera that way. I just think that the Gimlin film just so happened to capture one in the mirror of like 15 seconds. Just out of pure coincidence.
Right. No, so I agree totally. So, I mean, if you look at just primates that we know exist, right? Mountain gorillas, orangutans, bonobos, chimpanzees. It takes people months at a time to go out and stage an area and to pre-record and to record to get actual decent footage of these creatures. And so we know where they're at because, unfortunately, due to human encroachment, deforestation, they've only got limited places to stay, right? Over there, Africa, Asia.
Yeah.
There's only so much acres left. But in North America, and people don't realize the vast expanses of woods we still have left, we've got millions of acres of untapped resources just out there. So we can't do the same thing and just circle in and be like, oh, we know they're here. Because they could be here, they could be there, they could be down the street. We still have a lot more land than we think.
Absolutely. What do you, and I'm saying this kind of open-minded, when you picture Sasquatches hanging out, do you picture them hanging out with other Sasquatches, or do you, and this may sound like a stupid question, but it's just so that it pops up, or do you picture them hanging out with orangutans and gorillas and stuff like that in the, I don't know, the jungle, whatever you want to call it?
Right. So what a lot of people don't understand is, you've got your North American big sightings that we call Bigfoot or Sasquatch. But not only that, you've got the Urin in China, the Yahweh in Australia, the Abominable Snowman in Tibet, sightings of Gorilla Man in Russia. So we've seen creatures like this. People have been seeing creatures like this all around the world. For at least, the earliest sightings go back 16, 1700s, at least a few hundred years. So are they all related? At least some type from like the same species that kind of, shot off. Kind of like, you have
Mhm.
your North American seagulls, your European seagulls, you got ravens, you got crows, right? They're all closely related, but they're slightly
Yeah.
different. They live in different parts of the world. That's kind of the way I look at it. And so, do I know actual populations from each? Could I tell you, hey, in Russia, you got like 10 Yetis. Hey, in Northwestern America, you got 200 Bigfoot. In Australia, you got 50 urine. No, I couldn't say that, but it's a small enough population to be hidden, but a big enough one to continue to breed, which is totally
Mhm.
possible with great ape species because, like I brought up earlier, the bonobo, the orangutan, they're both extremely endangered right now, and they're very limited in Southeast Asia, where they're at Sumatra, the islands, Java, but they're still kicking. And if you don't know what to look for, you will never know they were there.
Mhm. So, just briefly here, what are you mentioned like the abominable snowman, the Yeti? Is that a different type of Sasquatch, or are they just called different things in different parts of the country?
So the way I think of it and the way I look at it, it's kind of the same like how we are is modern Homo sapien. Before you bring it back, we all originated out of the cradle of Africa. We spread out, we expanded. The Ice Age, we had the ice bridge, the Bering Ice Strait, so we could travel from Europe to North America. So if there were species, which is proven, Gigantopithecus, like we talked about earlier, was still alive and well and kicking during that time. If they were around that recent to us, why couldn't he or an offshoot have followed us over the Bering Land Strait to North America, followed us down, followed us through? Because as primate species go, we're the most successful. That's facts. That's proven, right? As humans, we
Mhm.
occupy every land on this world except for Antarctica all the time. So why couldn't a species that was maybe a little bigger, a little more elusive, follow suit?
Mhm. Now, you know, I'm gonna say that I'm gonna use mythical creature just for an example real quick because like the Loch Ness monster, I think
Right.
maybe about a year and a half ago they deemed that to be actually a myth, was never a thing. What would you do if one day you woke up and they all of a sudden just announced that Sasquatch was actually really a myth and the Gimlin film was actually fake, yada yada? What would be your first reaction to that?
Now, if they would tell me tomorrow, I wake up and they tell me the Patterson-Gimlin film was fake, I would call bullshit.
Okay.
Because just seeing the studies on it and the scientific, these modern dudes, right? Like our modern CGI artists, the guys that work in Hollywood, have chucked out this
Right.
film since the day it was made. People have been trying to
Yeah. Yeah.
they've been trying to debunk and discredit this film for 40, 50 years now, right? And they still have
Yeah.
not found definitive proof to prove it fake. And if anything, it leans to the contrary. You're like, wow, back in those years, we couldn't have that technology to make suits to where those muscles flex that way. We can't have a human being in a suit walk the way that animal did. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So proving that, unless you can actually 100% recreate it and find a guy that's like
Right.
7'2" and throw on a suit that has muscle expenditures and he can accurately recreate that walk on rocky terrain in Northern California, good luck. That's why I gotta say to any of them, good luck.
So, give a little background here. As I don't know how much time you got, but we're on about half an hour here. How much research have you done on have you just grazed on just information like if you're going for you're going out with your crew and you're like, okay, we're gonna go Bigfoot hunting tonight, what type of sounds would you be listening for or signs you'd be looking for in the presence of a Sasquatch?
Right, that's a great question, man. So you've
Yeah.
watched Finding Bigfoot. I'm sure you have.
Yeah.
I'm sure a bunch of your viewers, right, that watch your podcast have seen Finding Bigfoot, and they think we are all just.
And here's well, this is
Go
my
ahead.
thing also with that is how do they know those animals or those creatures make these type of sounds? You know, like that's kind of like, well, where did the history come from? You know, because Patterson-Gimlin did it. It was kind of silent, other than the walking and the footsteps. But
Right.
continue,
So
man. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
no, you're good, man. So I don't think so. It's like any creature, right? I was raised in small town Ohio. I've been hunting big game my whole life.
Yeah.
As a hunter, you're supposed to be silent in the woods, right? You don't go in
Mhm.
and announce your presence the minute you're there. You don't show up and just start
Right.
howling and yodeling and
Right.
thinking, you know what I mean? So that's my
Yeah.
biggest
Yeah.
disagreement with the Finding Bigfoot guys and their
Okay.
call blasting, they call it. So
Because they immediately go in and they take a big stick and they pop it up against a tree and they're like, "You hear that?" But here's my thing: it's like, how did you not know that's a tree falling 150 feet back? You can't see that. You know what I mean? That's kind of where
right,
I'm in the mind frame of, okay, it could be, but also it could be this. Like I'm getting in my head both ways. You know.
right. So I agree with you 100%. So any big game hunter will tell you if you go hunting out, say you're trying to go shoot coyotes on the western plains out Wyoming, say you're trying to go hunt for brown bear or gray wolf here in Alaska, you don't
Mm-hmm.
make your presence known and you don't just announce, hey, here I am, man, show up. So with the call blasting, that's the only thing that makes sense to me. Because as a big game hunter, so like take a wolf or even a coyote, for example, they respond to calls, from their main prey sources, right? Which are
Right.
rapids. You sound that off, you hide, you mask your scent.
Sure.
If they're in the area, they're going to show up. So I take the same approach to when I'm out there Bigfoot. I'm like, so if honestly they're anywhere between us and a chimpanzee or an orangutan or a gorilla, which is our DNA closest matches, right? As great apes.
Mm-hmm.
So what we'll do is we'll get the pheromone chips from local zoos and we'll hang up the pheromone chips and
Mm-hmm.
we'll blast orangutan mating calls, gorilla mating calls, chimpanzee mating calls. We're not out there yodeling and knocking trees and making ourselves known.
Yeah.
Like I don't think I think that's sensationalized for TV. To be honest with you.
So you're out there in Alaska. I'm gonna take a quick little detour here from Bigfoot. We'll come back to it before we jump off here. But you're in Alaska now. Never been really down that area. I've been like Texas and stuff like that. But I try to stay in my state just because especially with this coronavirus happening. But from what
Yeah.
I've seen on like Mountain Man or whatever else you want, Axeman, whatever you want to say, there are some places in Alaska that are just dead spot in the middle of nowhere. Where are you at? Like, are you living in a town or like a neighborhood, or are you living out in the middle of nowhere?
Right. So right now I'm stationed up at Fort Wainwright. So I'm in Fairbanks, Alaska, which is a
Okay.
small little borough, which is stretched out about probably 60 miles around is the actual town. But you
Mm-hmm.
leave this borough, you drive an hour and a half any direction, you're in the middle of pine forest. There's nothing for 6 hours. Either way, you go south, you get about a 4 or 5 hour drive till you hit Denali National Park, another hour till you hit Anchorage, the first big city close to us. You go north, there's nothing. It's the Arctic Circle, it's a tundra. There's nothing.
So when you go Sasquatch hunting, Bigfoot, and up there, you head north. Is that where you head?
I've gone all over around here, so
So where have you found the most activity there? Like, have you found it or have you found any, uh, you know, information or hypothesis about this?
Yeah, as a matter of fact. So where I'm at, right up here in Fairbanks, it's a very small town. It's part of, like, the Central Bureau. Like, we are in the middle of the state of Alaska. Around us is nothing but pine forest for miles. You can drive 5 hours any direction, nothing. And so I've gone out, I've taken 3-hour trips, I've taken just hour trips out of town. I've gone north, south. I've done 3 trips north, 2 trips to the south, and I've gone 1 trip. I've just drove basically as east as I could get. And I've found what I would call activity on all my trips. The most exciting thing I think I saw is when I went north. So I took off, drove probably about an hour and a half. We got a hot spring up here. It's called Chena Hot Springs. A lot of folks from up here, they know where it's at. It's kind of famous up here. So you keep going, and it's pine forest, man. You know what I mean? It's woods.
Yeah.
And I camped out there for 4 days by myself. I did a solo trip. And the first thing I did, I wasn't out there banging on trees and woo, you laying like the dudes on Finding Bigfoot did. I had my pheromone chips. I hung them up. I separated them probably, quarter mile apiece. No fires, just very quiet. And I just sat and I listened and I watched for 3 days. And they're very vocal. So that's the one thing I'll give the Finding Bigfoot folks credit for. They do call black, and you can hear it. And if you're a wild hunter up in Alaska, and you're up there, you've hunted for gray wolf, you've hunted for brown bear, you know what they sound like. These things, totally different sound.
I'm trying to think of where I want to go with this because I just have so many things running through my mind. Like,
Right.
You were out there, camping out for 3 or 4 days. Was there just a point in your mind where you were just like, okay, there's no activity here. I've got to go. Like, besides saying I'm going to stay 4 days, was there just a day where you're just like, maybe this was kind of stupid for me to be out here 4 days because there's nothing here?
Oh, definitely. My first couple days up there, I'm out there.
Really?
It's probably late September, so it's not too cold yet, but it's getting close to pushing those negative degrees that we get up here. I'm like, man, I'm up here shaking in my tent. I'm freezing. I have seen nothing except for like a couple of Arctic foxes. Why am I here right now? I was like, well, I'm here. I'll give it 2 more days. And then on that day, I'm ready to leave. I go to leave the tent.
When something hits.
I go to leave the tent, 1, 2 in the morning when it's just the darkest of dark out. And you just hear rustling 50, 75 yards off, and you're like, well, it could be anything, In my mind, like, I am a firm believer, and I do this, but in my heart, I'm a skeptic, right? So I judge all my evidence objectively, not subjectively. I'm like, I need to just pretend I've never heard of Bigfoot, right? I need to prove to myself it's real. And so I'm like, no, I don't believe this for a minute. But when I'm in my tent at 2 in the morning and I'm groggy, right, falling asleep, and all of a sudden you just hear like this scream. It sounds so close. It sounds like a woman, like an angry woman in pain. If you've ever heard that before, almost like a woman giving childbirth, just angry, guttural, primal, just scream. Right. And I'm like, I know what bobcats sound like. I know what lynx sound like. I know what mountain lions sound like. I've hunted all of them before. And this is a whole nother story. And you wake up the next day and you leave your little tent and you walk around and you just see trees 5, 6 foot up that has just been snapped. What creature in Alaska runs through the woods on 2 legs and can snap trees that are 6 foot tall?
And what are the odds that this big storm came through that you did not happen to feel, see, or even think about happening, and it snapped all 4 or 5 trees all in a row like that?
Well, if a storm like that
That,
would have happened, my tent would have been buried in
that's what
4 foot of snow,
that's what I'm
and I would
saying. That's what I'm saying.
exact.
So, last couple of things here, man, as we wind down. Let you get off here and enjoy your couple of drinks you're gonna have. I remember a couple of years ago, there was this photo going around. I don't know if you saw it. If not, then maybe I can try to find the article. This guy supposedly had killed this creature,
Right.
and he described his creature as a Sasquatch Bigfoot type of creature. And it was rolling around all over the internet, all over social media. The news picked it up.
Was this a guy
CNN.
down? Oh, sorry, man, I didn't mean
Uh,
to
no,
cut
you're
you off.
good. You're good.
Was this a guy down there in Georgia? Like I feel like I've heard something like this from like the southeast,
Are you talking
southeast
about
United
where?
States. He had it like in
I'm
his
not
street.
sure where. I'm not sure where it was at, but these people or the whoever they were claimed that it was not a Sasquatch. It was a hog or a pig or a boar. But you
Okay.
could obviously tell that it was not. It looked nothing like a wild hog, pig, boar I have ever seen in my life. It looked really, really creepy. It did have like a ape type of look, but it was like a hairy type of giant. Something I've never seen before. Not even close to a wild boar. So if there have been like, I want to know if there's like people that have said, "Man, look, I've took this picture of this before," and you've
Right.
looked at it and it's like, "Okay, I don't want to see a picture of your cat," you know?
Right. So, and that's the biggest thing. A lot of those guys in the community they hate hearing the word false identification because they don't want to look at it objectively and say, hey, maybe this could have been something else. But honestly, 75% of the cases we get and that I've investigated and people will call me, I'll go out and look. I'm like, mountain lions live in this area, right? You're from Oregon.
Yeah.
I'm from California. That screaming you're hearing is probably a fucking mountain. It's probably a mountain lion, man. Because I've heard them before. Here's a recording. Here's me in the field. Here's me hunting them. And they go, oh, that's actually pretty close to what I heard. I'm like, yeah, it's probably mountain lion, man. But see, here's the thing: if you take all those false identification cases, you take them out of the picture, just get rid of them, erase them.
Mm.
There are still thousands of people every year that see, hear, take pictures, have video, take plaster casts of something that we can't explain what it is. So you can get rid of about
Give me
25%
an
of the cases.
example.
What's that?
Give me an example of a story. Give me an example of a story when you get finished with that explanation.
Okay, so one of the biggest ones, about a year and a half ago, when I was still down in Texas, actually, a guy called me. He said, "Hey, man, there's been something on my property. I live in the Panhandle, out by Amarillo. About an hour out in the middle of nowhere. Something's been killing my cattle. I've been hearing screaming." I was like, "Okay, man. I'll come out. I'll check it out. Get out there, throw my tent up, throw up my blind, throw up the pheromone chips." The first night I call blasted some chimp calls, some gorilla calls, just see what would happen. Nothing. We got nothing back. No responses. I tried for 3 days. Heard, saw nothing. On the 4th day before I left, I got kind of desperate. I was like, all right, well, let's bait it in. Let's give it a shot. Went to the local butcher, bought about 20 pounds worth of goat meat, stacked it up, put a trail cam up. And lo and behold, do we find out, yeah, the man's got a mountain lion.
Mm. So, have you ever give me a story that you were just like, okay, I'm convinced this was some kind of a Sasquatch encounter? Do you have any of those?
I got plenty of them.
Give me
So
give me a give me a couple good ones.
I think the most convincing one, actually, I wasn't even in Ohio. So I went to Pennsylvania, the
Okay.
state of Oregon. So I'm on the Ohio-Pennsylvania border around Columbiana County, West Virginia border, in that area where it's very wooded, mountainous, rural, very rural. You know, you got maybe a house here. Your next neighbor lives 4 miles down the road. Maybe you see your neighbor twice a week if you're lucky. And I'm out there checking stuff out for a guy that called me. He said, "Hey, man, I think there's something going on my property." And I was like, "All right, well, you know, I'll come down and I'll take a look." Within the first 5 hours of being there, sun goes down. I'm out there. We have the pre-recorded guerrilla calls. You know, we're doing our thing. And within 2 hours, we get a response. And I have all this all recorded on the Bigfoot Hunter Society page. Like, so we've got this recorded. And I'm like, well, that's really weird. I'm like, there's no mountain lions in Pennsylvania. The government says they've been extinct here since, 1910. Nothing.
Mm-hmm.
And when you hear a mountain lion, you know the way it screams. It has that very high pitched, almost like a child or a very young woman scream. What we got was this deep, guttural, just almost a roar, but not quite.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm like, okay, that's interesting. That could be something, but we're not going to judge this off of this because we need to gather something else. So we set up some baited traps, put some meat up, some mulberries up, and some trail cams. Unfortunately, we got nothing on the camera, which I don't know how smart these things are, but they somehow know. They're like, look at this crazy green thing on this tree that you put up. I'm not dumb. I'm not falling for it. But he swiped through, and luckily, I put some barbed wire around the little bait we put up. Big tuft of hair. We got a tuft of hair, and I was like, okay, we can work with this. We'll see what happens. Send it off to University of Michigan. They test it. And the results come back unknown primate species.
Mm-hmm.
Which isn't rare. If you talk to anybody that's been doing this for a while and has been out, I believe his name, yes, Dr. Jeff Meldrum. The man, he's an expert at plaster casts. He's so he'll take the cast and look at them and say, there's no details on this cast. I can't really tell you if it's fake or not. But they have found dermal ridges on these casts that are shaped different from human, but close enough to, this is an unknown primate species. There's no way a human could fake this. And they have sent in, they did the same thing I did, sent in the hair samples, unknown ape species. Their chromosomes match, they're close, but we're not quite sure. And I got these things in West Virginia, Pennsylvania. So if I'm getting these in Pennsylvania, and then Jeff Meldrum's getting the same hair samples come back with the same DNA in California, clearly there's something going on that we don't know about.
Yeah, man. Last couple of questions here, and I'll let you go. If people are wanting to,
I can go down the rabbit hole. I can talk all night.
I can't too. That's why I got to cut myself off, because if not, we'll be going for like 4 or 5 hours.
Definitely
that is not good for my schedule here. But if someone wants to, do some research on this, and they've already seen the Patterson-Gimlin film, what would be a couple of great pieces of audio, video, research, equipment, details that they could look at and know, okay, because I like something that will make me go, oh, I kind of believe it, but here's this, instead of just straightforward, nah, that doesn't sound right, or yeah, I believe it 100%.
Right. So the first thing I would say, what you need to do is, have you ever heard of David Paulides?
I don't think so.
Okay, so it's called The Missing 411. It's by David Paulides. The man was a prior law enforcement officer for about 23, 24 years. And he started doing investigations in national parks about disappearances of people and how they disappear under weird circumstances. Like, say they'll find the only people they find alive are children, and the kids will tell you, "Oh, the big hairy man took care of me." And the adults they look for, they'll either find deceased. They won't find them at all, and they'll just find a stack of their clothes, and the actual person's gone. But if they do find a body, they're either up a mountain to where physically it's impossible for us as humans to get that high, or they'll find the body in an area that they already searched for. So to dive into this, I would honestly, if the Patterson-Gimlin film does not convince you, you need to look at David Paulides, The Missing 411, and you need to go back.
Is that a book or an article?
He's written several books. There's 2 movies out.
Okay. The Missing 411. What are you just talking about? Is that a book, article?
It's he's written several books and there's 2 movies. The first one is just called Missing 411.
Okay.
And the second.
Okay.
And the second one is called Missing 411: The Hunted. It's about hunters that disappear in the woods.
Okay. And you were saying something else before I interrupted you. I'm sorry about that as well.
So, no, you're good, man. No worries. So, if you go back, also another big eye opener is you go back to the early 17, 18, 1900s, and you look at the Native American tales about the Sasquatch. And quick Google search away, and if you know someone that's Native, if you can go to a reservation, especially on the West Coast out here, like Alaska, Oregon, Northern California, and talk to some people, they've had these stories of the hairy man passed down for generation to generation to generation. They would warn their children, don't go out in the woods and either the hairy man will snatch you away.
Some creepy stuff, man, here today. I think you've convinced me more than the actual air quote specialist expert has, just because, and I don't mean that in any offense or anything to anyone. It's just when you have someone like you that you know what I mean. When you have someone like you can look at both sides instead of taking everything and be like, yes, I believe everything about Bigfoot. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah.
So, man, before we get off here, no, go ahead. I'm sorry.
You get the guys to watch Animal Planet 2 times, and they buy right into that Finding Bigfoot show, which is clearly sensationalized for TV. The BFRO, like, if you go on their website, is a database. They're good. They have so many sightings marked down, but when it comes to, like, you want to go out and go on an expedition with them, right? You're a non-believer, and you're like, prove me wrong. They want you to pay $2,000. They want you to pay good money. If you want to do that with me, you want to come and see something with me, I ain't charging you a dime. Come up here, let me know, give me a couple months advance so I can take leave from my job, and I will happily take you out here in the middle of nowhere, Alaska, in these woods. I'll make a believer out of you.
Yeah, man. So next time I'm somewhat near Alaska, I will let you know, and we will definitely make that thing happen, because I want to believe it, but I believe that you're the person that's not going to go, and we're going to stage all these events the day before, and we're going to have all these traps go off at this specific time, 11:15. Okay, you're going to have that rope's going to attach from that tree branch, going to slam against this trunk.
Yeah.
It's going to make
that
horrible.
ain't me.
I knew you wouldn't do it like.
We find nothing. We find it all. There ain't no in between.
Man, before we jump off here, let everybody know where you can find your stuff and your socials and all that.
I appreciate you having me on, dude. My name's Keith Diggins. I'm the founder of Bigfoot Hunter Society. I got the Facebook page and the group. If I try my best to at least do 2 expeditions a year. Like I said, I'm up here in Alaska right now, so if you're in the Fairbanks area, Anchorage area, you want to go out and check out Denali, you want to go travel with me, hit me up, we'll do it. I usually make it back down to Ohio about twice a year, once in the summer, once in the winter. We'll go down to Salt Fork National Park where they do the Bigfoot conference every year, and we'll do our own
Mm.
expeditions down there because, like I said, I try to take the sensationalism away and show you the actual facts of what's going on.
Well, what's a Bigfoot conference? You just opened up another door that I'm curious about. Bigfoot conference is that where everybody just gets together, kind of like an AA meeting, and talks about Bigfoot, or is it where everybody goes, 150 people go hunt for him?
No, you about nailed it. So every year down there is Salt Fork National Park. So in Ohio, they call it the Ohio Grassman. Ohio actually has, out of all the states, the fourth most sightings of Bigfoot every year.
Mm.
So in South Central Ohio, they have the Bigfoot Conference. And you've got the BFRO, you got the Matt Moneymakers there, you've got your Dr. Jeff Meldrum's there, your David Paulides, he's been there. Anybody in between, they go down to Salt Fork National Park because it's a sighting hotspot.
Well, man, Keith, I appreciate you being on here, man. And next time I want to talk Bigfoot and more paranormal, I'll let you know. We'll get you back on. Really do appreciate it, man.
That sounds great, man. Sounds great. I can go down this rabbit hole for days at a time. So.
All right, man. Appreciate it. You have a good one.
Hey, you too, brother. I appreciate you for having me on, man. And we'll talk to you next time.
Yeah, man. Appreciate your service. Have a good one.
Hey, thank you. You too. Take it easy. Be safe down there, man.
You too, man.